after watching 3 videos on the subject of the law of attraction and its functioning, I see logic in some parts. But at the point where we reach the state of consciousness on various levels, the thread disappears. In the body, or the body in us, exists only in the 3-dimensional world, at higher levels of consciousness. The vast majority of the population does not exist because their consciousness as such does not function without a body. Which means that regardless of the level of consciousness a human being is in order to exist and be aware of its existence, it must have a form. In other words, it must have a body that in any way exists in the 3-dimensional world, and which will bind it to the 3-dimensional world. In nothingness, there is nothing but fear. Unless we are a master who perfectly controls our life energy on every level of reality, both visible and invisible, but must remain consciously connected to the body that is in 3-dimensional reality. Otherwise, it gets lost in that nothingness and disappears. If we go in the direction that our body is inside us, while we are part of the overall consciousness, then we are no longer alive in the 3-dimensional world, because at that level of consciousness, there is no life without a body. In order to consciously live on one of the higher levels of consciousness, we can only survive as our own energy or part of someone's subconscious. Otherwise, it will get lost and disappear in that void. If we move towards the direction of our inner existence, while being a part of the collective consciousness, then we are no longer alive in the 3-dimensional world. Because at that level of consciousness, life doesn't exist without a physical body. In order to consciously live on a higher level of consciousness, we can only survive as part of our own energy or someone else's subconscious. But even then, it's only possible when our innate body exists intact in the 3-dimensional reality. Once we only exist in someone's subconscious, we cease to exist as a living body, and eventually, under the pressure of new knowledge, we disappear from the subconscious of that body. Humans born from dust don't possess the same ability as those born through verbal creation. I can agree that the world is a hologram, that we create ourselves because I was in nothingness, and I know that where there is no conscious being, there is nothing. Only when you return from nothingness do you understand what death is, because while you are in it, there is nothing, including you, created by our own thoughts. But this is only possible if we are free and protected from the external and subconscious influences of other people, who benevolently or maliciously interfere in our mental process. At the energy level, the 3-dimensional world disappears, which means that we are mentally elevated or lowered, depending on whether we raised or lowered ourselves to a certain level, or were lowered or raised by someone else. If we did it ourselves, we still remain at the level of our own values, one overall knowledge, focus, and strength of our will, gathering knowledge. But if someone else did it, then most often the third brain is involved, and of course, fear and anger. So, we will easily learn to think positively and create our perfect world by the law of attraction only if we are free and pure. In the body or with our own body in us, only if we are completely protected in our community from negative and evil, regardless of whether they are called spirit guides, or angels, people. And that's why whether we have 7 or 707 chakras in our body, if we find ourselves on an energy level set by someone more powerful, we are completely helpless without sincere protection. Fear can bring us back to a moment of awareness that will save us in the third dimension. But without a trustworthy guardian, our body will take a long time to recover, if it survives. Our fear can bring us back to a moment of lucidity that will save our existence in the third dimension. But without a good, sincere, and honest guardian, our body, if we manage to survive, will take a long time to recover from such an event. The law of attraction works, but not equally for all people, because in addition to lifters there are also spinners who, if we are subconsciously obsessed with negative energy, turn every positive thought into a negative one, to our advantage and to our detriment. That's why there are so few people who can organize their lives using the law of attraction.